SSL Network Extender. Alright everyone, we have arrived at one of the most exciting parts in this series for me, and that is an application called SSL Network Extender, or SNX as it's commonly known. In this particular nugget, we're going to cover why choose SSL Network Extender as an option for your organization, and then we're going to look at the actual SNX concepts of using this option as an SSL VPN choice. And then we will follow up the concepts discussion with the actual SNX configuration, and then we're going to step to Smart Dashboard and set this up to allow our remote users to have remote connectivity to our organization no matter where they're at. So sit back, take some notes, and you're really going to enjoy SSL Network Extender. So let's configure our SSL Network Extender. Let's say, for example, it's the holiday season. You and your family are at the mall. You're walking around having a great time when your cell phone rings. You pick up your cell phone and you realize it's your boss who tells you our entire VPN infrastructure is down at this point. So what do? Typically, you might go into panic mode, trying to scramble out of the mall as quickly as you can to the car, and then fight the traffic all the way back to your house to gather your network connectivity, or try to go to the office with your family in tow. Using SSL Network Extender, you could quickly alleviate any kind of problems, because SSL Network Extender is going to give you the ability to be able to walk up to any coffee shop or anywhere that you can get internet access and be able to connect to your company over any standard web browser, over a 443 HTTPS connection or any dynamic port that you would like to use, and be able to access your company resources and not leave any trace of that particular connection behind on that PC when you leave. So now what we are going to do in this particular nugget, we're going to set up SSL Network Extender. To set up our SSL Network Extender, we're going to use Nugget Firewall B. Now you might remember from our network diagram that we presented in the introductory part of this particular series, we have three remote locations. We have our branch office of Nugget Firewall B and Nugget Firewall C, and we have our headquarters where our Nugget cluster is being kept. Now we're going to use Nugget Firewall B to host our SSL Network Extender termination point, so our remote employees would come in over the internet and connect to that particular firewall and then be able to route anywhere on the network. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to need to set up this particular firewall object. I went ahead and installed Secure Platform and did the basic firewall installation process that would normally take place. So the first thing we need to do is get our Nugget Firewall B defined inside a Smart Dashboard. And this isn't going to work immediately, but it brings up a very important point when actually administering firewalls across the internet or at remote locations. There are some security rules and some options of processes and ports that we need to be familiar with, so I'm going to show those to you as part of defining this particular firewall inside a Smart Dashboard. So let's open up Smart Dashboard. We have our standard policy where we see our Nugget cluster and our two management servers that are defined to give us management HA. And now we're going to set up that particular firewall. So we're going to choose New, Checkpoint, Gateway, Simple Mode. And this is going to be Nugget-Firewall-B. And its actual IP address that we're going to put on this particular object is going to be the external IP, which is going to exist in the 172 space like all of our current internet IPs are. So it's going to be 172.20.20.30, and the internal IP we will define is going to exist in the 10.20.30 range. But that looks good for now. We'll choose Firewall and VPN, choose Next. We're going to put in our particular SIG key. We're going to choose Next. And what will typically happen at this point is it will go across our Nugget management server, which has a static NAT on it, as we saw in earlier parts of this series, to allow it to talk to the internet. Now, that is only half of the battle. True, our Nugget firewall is set up to be able to route out the internet connection, but we have to keep in mind we have an internal to internet rule that's kind of restricting that particular internal host from where it can go and what kind of protocols or ports it can use. So we're going to give this a couple minutes. This is actually going to fail on us, and then we're going to dive into SmartView Tracker, and I want to show you exactly why this is failing. So we'll just go ahead and choose next for now. It shows us that the SIC process has failed, and that's fine. We'll choose next, and we'll choose finish. And it's going to create an actual ICA certificate and add it to the certificate authority in order to allow VPN. But we'll hit OK for now, and that looks good, and we have our Nugget Firewall B defined here. So let's open up our actual SmartView Tracker, and we're going to pull up some logs here. As we can see, it successfully created the certificate for this particular firewall in our internal certificate authority, and if we choose next, we can see that this particular port got dropped. Our source was our Nugget management server trying to talk to Nugget Firewall B over its external IP on the ICA push protocol, which is 18.2.11 TCP, and it got dropped because that's not defined in our current security rule base. So let's define that and see if we can get SIG set up with this particular firewall, and then we'll move on and get our SSL network extender fully deployed and allow our employees to be able to connect across the internet to that Nugget Firewall B and be able to authenticate and take care of business while they're out of the office or when they're, at a friend's house, and they don't have to drag their laptops everywhere, which also presents a great security exposure because, as you know, from time to time, employees do lose laptops, and if you don't have an actual encryption mechanism on that particular laptop, that could present a security problem if any kind of information was to be gathered by bad guys. But anyway, for now, so let's go ahead and get this particular rule defined in order to allow our Nugget management server to talk out through our internet connection for this particular firewall policy of TCP port 18.2.11. So let's close off of here. We'll open up our Nugget management server. We'll open up our firewall management rule, and we can see we have a few rules here. So what we're going to do is we're going to define another rule that's right below this firewall management rule. And we can go ahead and actually probably add it to this particular rule, and we don't need to define another one. But for now, let's go ahead and set that up. So what we're going to do in this particular option is we want it to be able to hit these particular rules as well, or these particular protocols. So that's perfectly fine with me. So what we're going to do is add our actual Nugget management server as the source. So let's add that as a source on the packet. Alright, Nugget management looks good. And we would add our secondary server as well for Nugget management B, our backup. So we'll choose that. That looks good. The destination is going to be Nugget Firewall B, so let's put that in. And we will do this for any of our firewalls that we're going to manage. You're essentially going to have a rule that's going to allow it to be at a remote location and go through the NAT that you currently have on your Nugget management server right here, which is on the internet side, and be able to remotely manage that particular firewall. So we have that in place. We have the rule. It looks good. Now we need to add that service. So let's go add. We're going to type in FW1, and we're going to see a few options here. And as we scroll down, you can see there's quite a few options here that have to do with the FW1 process or FW1 protocol. Now the one that we want to use is going to be the FW1 push, and we might need to do the pull as well. So let's go ahead and add both of those to our particular rule as services. We're going to accept that, we're going to log it, and we're going to use our policy target, which is the Nugget cluster, and that's defined based on the policy installation targets right here. Alright, so let's cancel off of there, do a policy install, push this out to our cluster. Then we're going to go and make sure that we have SIC established and make sure that we can ping that particular cluster or that particular firewall if we were to unload the policy on it. And once you can get a few successful ping packets across, you could actually go in at that point and set up your SIC. But by default, keep in mind that the default filter is going to leave the port open to allow you to be able to set up the secure internal communication on a checkpoint firewall. So it's not absolutely necessary to run an FW unload local on the firewall. It's just a policy I have found, and being as if I'm controlling both sides of the fence here, I'm not going to be highly unsecure because I'm only going to pass 10 to 15 packets of ICMP between me and that particular host. So the option for someone attacking that particular firewall in that short time is very low. But let's do show warnings for now, and it's talking about some anti-spoofing on our Nugget Firewall B, and that's perfectly fine because we need to still define some things on that firewall. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set up a SIC to this particular firewall and make sure that we can communicate with it, and then we'll move on from there. So now that we set up our SIC key on our Nugget Firewall B, let's see if we can connect to it and be able to get our secure internal communication established. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we can actually ping that particular firewall now, because we have the actual policy on it that's going to allow us to be able to do the default filter, which is going to allow the SSH protocol as well as the protocols for the ICA push and a pull to be able to be accessed to set up SIC. A typical ICMP packet to the firewall will probably fail, but let's see exactly what it will look like at this point. Alright, and this should fail, and that's completely normal because the default filter is not going to allow an ICMP packet to be passed to this firewall. So what we want to do is let's open up PuTTY. We should be able to PuTTY over to this particular firewall because by default Splat is going to listen for port 22. So let's do a 172.20.20.30 and see if we can hit this particular firewall. Alright, it's going to ask us to prove the actual RSA security key, so we'll do that, and then we'll log into the firewall. Alright, so we can see we're on Nugget Firewall B now. So let's open up our actual dashboard, open this up, go into communication, let's do a reset, yes, okay, put our SIC key in, initialize that. Alright, looks good. Trust established. Test the actual SIC process, and it's communicating. So we're in great shape. We have our actual SIC process set up between us and Nugget Firewall B at this point. So now we need to go through and define the other parameters that we need to get this firewall in place. So let's go ahead and hit OK for now. And it's going to tell us that no interfaces are defined and the topology information. So we'll just say no, that we don't want to get out. Let's go define that real quick. So we'll tell it to get interfaces from this particular firewall, and we can see that our external interface is the .30 and the internal is a 1020.30.2. So we'll go ahead and accept that. Alright, that looks perfectly well. So what we need to do is define the actual topology on these interfaces. So ETH0 under topology is going to be the external interface. We're going to perform anti-spoofing, hit OK, and then we'll open up ETH1, and this is going to be our internal interface, and network is going to be defined by the IP and IPNet mask, and we're going to perform anti-spoofing there as well. Hit OK, it looks perfectly fine, and now we're going to hit OK, and we shouldn't get any error message anymore, so we're in good shape. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to actually set up a particular object to represent this particular network on the outside. So we need to define what we're going to see here. We see our actual Nugget Firewall B being defined right here in our Smart View monitor or our Smart Map information, and we can see this 102030 network. So let's right click on that, actualize that actual network, set up a NAT on it, tell it to do a hide NAT, and to hide behind the gateway. And we need to install this particular NAT rule will be installed on the Nugget Firewall B. So we're going to set that up to be an automatic NAT rule to state when anybody behind the 102030 network, which is going to be the internal network behind Nugget Firewall B, wants to go to the internet and they need to perform network address translation to get that done, hide that particular packet behind the Nugget Firewall B. So hit OK on there. We're in good shape, and under networks we have this particular network defined now. So we're in good shape there. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and do a view, and let's turn off Smart Map because we don't need it right now. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually save our policy, and we're going to set up a separate policy to manage Nugget Firewall B. I like to have a separate policy per firewall. I know a lot of people kind of argue with the fact that, you know, it's easier to have one policy per firewall management station. I prefer to have a separate policy for every firewall that I'm actually managing. and you could take whichever side of the fence there you want to go on. But I have found in some situations, if people don't take the correct precautions, like setting up your policy installation target, you could actually install the wrong firewall policy on the wrong firewall and completely take down the site. So, as we know, under policy installation targets, we have an actual failsafe here that says for this standard policy, it can only be installed on the Nugget cluster. And that's in good shape, and that's going to help you, prevent that type of activity from happening. But what I'd like to do is to have a single policy per firewall. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose File, and we're going to do a copy policy to package, choose Security, Address, and Translation, choose Next, and we're going to call this Firewall B policy. So what we're going to do is Firewall -B -policy. Looks good. Alright, choose Next, and we'll choose Finish. And we can save that policy at that point. Choose File, Open, and we're going to open that particular policy. And what we're going to see is a lot of this information looks exactly like our cluster policy, because what it is a complete snapshot of that particular policy. But now we're going to customize it to be exactly what we need it to be. So under Firewall Management here, we're going to open this up. We're going to say from our Nugget Trainer machine, which is on the outside internet side, can talk to our Nugget Cluster B. And that's in good shape. Over these particular protocols for ICA and ICA push looks fine for us at this point, and for Nugget management as well. So what we're going to do is just take out what's not really pertinent for this particular policy. Being as if it's a separate policy, we don't need the Nugget cluster in there. Nugget management and Nugget management B can be the source for packets because they both have external NATs on them talking to this particular firewall. And it's not going to really talk to Nugget PCA because that's going to exist behind the actual Nugget clusters where those NATs and internal IP for this host actually exist. So we can take it out. And the source can be Nugget PCA because if we open this up, it does have a NAT on it. So it's from time to time it might need to come across the internet in order to be able to manage or talk to this particular firewall. So we'll leave that in there. Those policy looks fine. This particular rule right here can actually go because it has to do with cluster sync traffic. So we can take that out between the two Nugget cluster nodes. Stealth rule, and it's going to be anybody directly toward our Nugget B firewall. We're going to drop that packet because we want it to be transparent to anybody going through the firewall or going directly toward the external interface on the firewall. We want to drop that traffic. Alright, so the next thing we have internal to internet. So this particular rule right here, we need to set these up. Now on our Nugget Trainer machine, we can see it's out on the outside IP address right here. So we need to define the subnets. So we're going to delete that. We're going to add our 1020/30 network, which is going to be the internal network for behind the Nugget B firewall. And we're going to drag that down to here as well. Remove this one. And we have our internal to internet rule, which is going to allow this particular internal subnet, which still has its NAT on it, to behind Nugget Firewall B to go out to the internet. So we're in good shape there. Log reduction is going to stay, and our cleanup rule is definitely going to stay. Alright, so that looks pretty good there. Let's check everything, make sure it's working as we would expect it to, and make sure that we can actually talk to our particular firewall and different things correctly. So that looks like we're in pretty good shape at that point. So let's go ahead and see if we can deploy this particular policy out to our Nugget Firewall B. So what we need to do is do our policy installation target. Make sure you're always doing this and lock this down to a particular policy. We want to state that for this policy, it can only be installed on Nugget Firewall B. So let's save that. Do a policy verification to verify exactly what we have here. Make sure it's in good shape. It verifies OK. And now let's try to do a policy install, and we're going to attempt to push this out to Nugget Firewall B and just see what happens. We might need to do a little bit more as far as security rules go, but we're going to see exactly what happens at this particular point. So it's going to verify and it's going to attempt to install, and if we're lucky, everything should go completely well. We won't have to add any additional information. And we can see installation completed successfully to our Nugget Firewall B. So we're in good shape. Now we can dive in to the important parts of getting SSL Network Extender defined. So that's part of the legwork that you have to do whenever you install any kind of firewall. You have to get everything installed, you have to get it defined, you have to get your topology set up, and a particular policy for basic management and communication to that firewall in place as well. So now we're going to dive into our SSL Network Extender portion of this particular nugget. So now we're going to actually configure our SSL Network Extender now. I know I've promised that a couple times in this particular nugget, but we had to get our groundwork of getting that particular firewall in place in order to host the SSL Network Extender application. So the first thing that we need to do for the Nugget Firewall B in order to get this working is we need to open up VPN, open up remote access, participating gateways, and we're going to actually at this point add the Nugget Firewall B into this participating gateway, for example. We'll go ahead and remove Nugget Cluster for now because we're going to get into this a little bit later where we're using this as part of a remote access or a site-to-site VPN between both sites, and we're going to use that at some point. But let's go ahead and add our particular groups in place, and we have an SSL VPN group that we're going to use as well. So let's use that in place, and I'm going to show you exactly how to define all that information for sure. So we'll go ahead and remove that for now, and we'll hit OK here for now. And now we need to open up Nugget Firewall B. We need to make sure that we can uncheck VPN just for a second. We'll recheck it, hit OK. Looks good. Just to make sure we have these options available. Participating gateways. And we're going to add Nugget Firewall B to this particular remote access community for now. Now we're going to get into communities, and when basically what it just talks about with having a community, it's just a simplified mode or an easy way to getting a VPN session either remote access or site-to-site defined in your checkpoint security policy. But for now, we're going to go ahead and put our Nugget Firewall B into this particular remote access community, and this is going to allow our remote users to be able to talk over the proper protocols required for the IPsec, IKE, as well as the HTTPS traffic that needs to come toward the Nugget Firewall B. And we can see that there's a participating user group as well that we can add to this particular group, and we'll do that for now. So let's do add, and we see that we have, by default, we have all users in this VPN1 group, and we have SSL VPN group. So let's go ahead and add that for now, and we'll hit OK, and we can see our SSL VPN group is being allowed to talk to the Nugget Firewall B. So how do we define that? Under Manage, Users and Administrators, we have a group here for SSL VPN group, and all I did is do New and Group, and we created a new user group, and then we set up a new template. Under Template, we have Remote Users. So we set up a new template for remote users just by going New and then choosing User Template or New Template at the bottom. And as part of that particular template, we created a user called Joseph. Now, under authentication, Joseph is using a checkpoint password, which is being managed in the local database part of the actual Smart Center server. We have a few other options where we can authenticate based on the typical values you would see as part of your CCSA world, where you can use OS password, radius, TACAC, secure ID, and all the various options there. But for now, we're just using the checkpoint password. So we'll hit OK there. We'll close off of this. So we have our SSL VPN group. We created our template first, and then we created Joseph, and then we created a group to put Joseph in as the SSL VPN group, and that's going to be the people who are authorized to talk to the Nugget Firewall B for our particular SSL network extender information. So that's the first part of the process. You get your group defined, you get your user defined, you get your users added to that particular group, and then you create the actual Nugget Firewall B as part of a member of the remote access community. So we have that in place. That's the first part of the process. Now we need to open up Nugget Firewall B, and then we need to choose under VPN link selection. Under link selection, we need to select the address from the topology table. This needs to be your external interface or whatever interface your particular users will be hitting the firewall on. In our case, it's going to be our 172 IP, which is 172.20.30, so that looks good. And now under remote access, we can choose a few options here. Now the first thing we're going to see here is for office mode. What is office mode? Office mode is going to give us the ability to alleviate some local routing issues that typically happen in a remote access type VPN. We're going to create an actual office mode pool that the firewall is going to know about, that's going to be totally separate from its defined topology, but it's going to know how to route this information through the firewall based on office mode, and we're going to see that now. So we're going to say offer office mode to a particular group, our SSL VPN group, and we're going to tell it to allocate IP addresses from a particular network. And under network, we're going to choose OM. I created a group called OM just to represent the office mode network, and that's already been defined. So that looks good for now. We'll go ahead and hit OK on this for now, and it's going to say that the VPN is installed. It would now do the IKE properties as well. So that's fine. We hit OK there. That's cool. Everything's good now. For now. So what I want to show you is under networks here, there's a group called office mode. So what I did is just created a default network for 172.16.0.0 with a 24-bit subnet mask that's going to be represented as our office mode pool that we're going to issue to our SSL network extender users. So that's in place for now. So let's go back into the firewall object. We need to define a few more things. So under VPN, we already covered link selection. That looks great. Under remote access, now we need to choose SSL clients. We're going to turn on SSL network extender, but it's going to tell you in order for you to do this, you have to turn on visitor mode as well. So under clientless VPN and under actual remote access right here, we have to turn on support visitor mode. And what visitor mode is, in some restrictive hotels or some environments, they don't allow users to be able to pass over standard IPsec type protocols. So a lot of times you have to use visitor mode, which is going to allow you to make a VPN connection across a standard internet port that's typically open on their firewalls, such as HTTPS or any other protocol here that is pretty much the more common ones are either HTTP, which is port 80, or HTTPS, which is 443, and that's typically what you will see. And we're going to support that the machine's interface on all interfaces is perfectly fine for visitor mode, because we're kind of controlling that information based on our link selection category from the internet side of things. So we're in good shape there. Now we have our office mode defined. We have our actual visitor mode defined. Now we can go into SSL clients, turn on SSL network extender, and we need to choose the gateway authenticates this certificate with its internal default cert. That's perfectly fine. We're in good shape there. And at this point, we're in pretty good shape as far as the actual gateway is concerned. We can see the different authentication mechanisms. We can turn off these other ones if we're not using those for now. Not 100% a problem, but you can control that. You can look at your logs and masters and set up your different types of log information, which we're basically logging everything back to our Nugget management server, so any of our logging parameters are controlled there. Of course, capacity optimization is going to deal with our actual connections table that's going to be processed by the firewall. We're going to see calculate our actual hash memory size and memory pool, and we have our VPN capacity optimization. So what's the maximum concurrent IKE negotiations and the maximum concurrent tunnels? And those are default values, and it's okay to leave those for now. Under cooperative enforcement, we have the options here for the integrity server, which is one of Checkpoint's products, which has kind of went away and it's been embedded into a product called endpoint security. So we're not going to dive into that tangent for now. And under advanced, we have a few other options for SNMP, SMTP, where we're setting up some default values for accepting mail through this firewall. Connection persistence, you can set this value to whatever you deem necessary for your network. I like it to be when installing an actual security policy on your firewall. You can do rematch connection, you can keep all connections, and you can keep data connections. I'm going to do keep all connections so it doesn't break anything during a policy install. And we have our permissions to install on our send offender. So we're in good shape now. So that's everything we need to define as part of the actual gateway properties. So we'll hit OK for now. And now we need to go to Policy, Global Properties, and then under Remote Access, we need to choose SSL Network Extender. And with the user authentication method, by default, is going to be set to Legacy. You need to change that to Mixed Mode. You have the option here where you can control the exact encryption methods that are going to be presented. By default, it's going to be triple DES or RC4. I'm going to lock ours down to triple DES. Client upgrade upon connection. Whenever you're going to be using this or giving it out to your users, you can tell it to always ask the user for an upgrade, or you can set it to always upgrade or do not upgrade. For me, I'm going to set this to do not upgrade just in case somebody's out using it at a coffee shop or anything. And it says client uninstall upon disconnection. I'm going to set ours to always uninstall because we don't want to leave any traces behind. And this is the integrity clientless security. We're going to leave this for none for now. What this will do is do a default scan on the particular SSL connection to make sure you have some default values for security such as AV, maybe spyware or anything like that on the particular machine you're connecting from. But we're not going to configure that particular value for now because, like I said, this integrity product has quickly been embedded into a product called Endpoint Security. Under Advanced, we have an option here to re-authenticate every 480 minutes and send keep alive every 20 seconds. Those values are perfectly fine. So we'll hit OK for there for now. We'll hit OK here for now. And now we'll save this particular policy. And the next thing we need to set up is an actual security access rule in order to get our SSL network extender working. Now, one point to remember for SSL network extender, in order to get it set up and running, you have to have a license on your firewall, and it has to be defined. Now, you can obtain an SSL network extender license from a Checkpoint reseller or from Checkpoint themselves if you have an account, and you can get a demo license, or if you're going to purchase a product, you'll have a full install license, and that license needs to be attached to your management server or your smart center, or if you're using provider 1, in that case it's going to be the CMA level of that particular setup. But for now, so we have all those in place. I went ahead and got us a default license. I attached that to the Nugget management server through Smart Update. We have all that defined, and now we need to set up a network or security access rule in order to get the remote access information to come toward our firewall. And we can restrict exactly where they can go and all those different things. So what we're going to do is under this particular rule right here, we're going to add rule below. So rules, add rule below. We're going to actually add a section title above this called remote VPN. Alright, looks good for me. Alright, and now it's going to be, the source is going to be our particular user group, which is our SSL VPN group. Going toward the destination is any for now. Under VPN, you choose Edit Cell, and we choose only connections from a particular group. Site to site or a specific VPN community is what we're looking for. So we choose Add, we choose Remote Access, we hit OK. OK here, we're going to accept this. We're definitely going to log it. And on the actual policy, we can tell it to use the policy targets that are defined in our policy installation targets. So that's perfectly fine. And we can actually name this rule SSL VPN. Alright, looks good for now. So let's do a policy install, push that policy out to our Nugget Firewall B, and then we're going to go down the internet side of things and try to come toward the firewall on its 172.20.20.30 IP address and see if we can authenticate. Now, one additional point I need to tell you about: if you do not change the dynamic web UI or web user interface IP that's part of the secure platform install, our standard build has always been to set up to use port 1980 for our web UI. You could have a conflict, and you might need to change that if you're trying to get SSL Network Extender up and running. You may need to go into the command line of that particular firewall and issue a web UI space enable to some other port other than 443, which is the default port. And for us, we have already set up port 1980 as our default web UI, so we won't have that problem. So that looks good. So let's close off of here for now. Let's save our particular policy. And now what we're going to do is see if we can actually connect to our Nugget firewall on its external interface at this point. So let's close off of here, and now we're going to open up an Internet Explorer, and let's just do an HTTPS to to the external IP is 172.20.20.30. Hit enter, and we'll just see what we get here. And it's going to say opening the page, and this is going to take a few minutes for this to take effect. Now don't be discouraged when you install your security policy the first time if it doesn't immediately pop up. There are times where you need to set it up and you have to install your security policy and give it about 10 to 15 minutes for everything to take hold on that particular firewall. So I'm going to give it a second here. Let the security policy take effect on that particular B firewall, and then we will test using our SSL network extender toward that particular firewall. So we've set up SSL network extender. We configured everything in the smart dashboard that we need to configure, and now we're going to test the actual connection across our internet connection toward the external interface of our Nugget B firewall. So as we can see, I'm on our internet side of things, well, on the 172.20.20.23 machine, and we're going to go toward the .30 machine. So what we're going to do is open up our Internet Explorer here and do an HTTPS : / to 172.20.20.30, which is going to be the external IP of the firewall. We're going to get a digital certificate option here. Now you can configure certificates for your particular site and all that, but in the sake of conversation and showing you a base configuration, I left that part out. But we can just hit OK for now. It's still going to work perfectly fine. And it's asked us, do we want to proceed? We say yes. And as we can see, it's going to go through and actually download an SSL network extender template here that we need to use to connect. So let's try to log in as our user, Joseph. Alright, and we're going to issue his default password. And let's try to connect. And as we can see, we get another little prompt here about do we want to install the ActiveX control. So we have to allow that. We'll install the actual SSL network extender software, so if you were at that remote coffee shop that we talked about, it would download it, it would install it as part of your communication to the actual IP of your firewall. But as soon as you disconnect, we're going to see it's going to remove everything and take all traces out. So what do we see? We see gateway identification. We're getting an actual certificate prompt from our Nugget Firewall B. So we click yes, and that's going to go through and authenticate. So we're in really good shape at this point. And what do we see? We see Checkpoint SSL Network Extender is connected. It's using the Office Mode pool that we defined. And it's going to show that we have the current IP of 172.16.0.2. So if we were to go to Start and go to Run and go to Command on this particular machine, and we do a netstat-rn, we can see based on the routing table here that it actually injects a route for us to get back to the 172.16 network, which is Office Mode. But the cool thing is that it directly knows about all connections on that particular firewall. So if we wanted to ping the internal interface of that particular B firewall, that would be the 10.20.30.2, and that's pingable. So you see the beauty there? That is remarkable. It's one of the greatest creations, in my opinion, that Checkpoint has ever created. SSL Network Extender is going to be an easy configuration. It's going to be something that's going to be really scalable, and it's going to work well for your users. So if they're out and about, they don't always have to drag a laptop with them. As long as they're close to something with some kind of internet connection or some kind of PC, maybe they're going to their in-laws or on vacation or wherever, they can use SSL Network Extender to be completely resilient, and it's definitely going to be a great security solution for maybe you have bad weather in your area of the country and you get a lot of your employees and maybe they get snowed in and it makes it very difficult for them to get to the office, or if there's sickness or anything else, you could use SSL Network Extender to provide the connectivity that they need to get them into the office network with no problems. So let's go ahead and check a couple other things here, and let's see, can we actually get to the actual internet at this point. And let's just do a basic ping out to 4.2.2.2, and we're pinging there too. So as we can see, if we do a trace route, what we're going to see is our actual connection to the internet is going to take the path to go through your local connection. We can see the default gateway of the .1 is for this network, but for all network resources that are part of the actual encryption domain and all that type of information that makes up the actual firewall, we'll look at that as well. And that's something that we're going to look at as part of all of our VPN discussions. We're going to go over the actual encryption domain, but let's just look at that in the way it looks right now. So we're going to disconnect, and I want you to see exactly what happens once we disconnect from SSL Network Extender. As part of the process, it's going to remove the software. So it's going to give us the connectivity that we need. It's going to remove all traces that our employee was on that particular machine, and it's just going to work really well for us. So once this actually does a full disconnection here, what we're going to do is we're going to log into our SmartView monitor or our actual smart dashboard on top of our Nugget firewall and do some quick verification looking at our SmartView tracker logs and a couple other things. So it'll just take a couple minutes in most situations for it to go through and actually uninstall your Checkpoint SSL Network Extender, and once that's done, you'll be in good shape just to go ahead and leave the web page, and you're going to be in awesome shape at that point. So let's open up Smart Dashboard. We're going to connect to the public IP of our Smart Center, which is the 20.20.20. Let's log into it, and once we log into it here, we're going to jump over to SmartView Tracker and do some quick verification. So if we do Window and we look at SmartView Tracker, we can scroll down here. We can see some basic logs here, and what do we see? Right here we're going to see an actual connection that came inbound, and it's going to say the source is the 172.16.0.2 toward the Nugget Firewall B. The user is Joseph. Reason SSL Network Extender connected to the gateway. So that's really cool. So we can see that we have a login process here. Now there's another log here we can look at as well. So let's look at this, and it's going to say that the user from this source, we can see we came from this IP address, user Joseph, connected via SSL Network Extender, authenticated by the username and password. So we're in great shape here. And now whenever we actually pass any packets between our remote location and our firewall location or our internal network that we're coming through, it's going to completely encrypt and decrypt those particular packets. So we can see once that packet arrived at the Nugget Firewall B, we decrypted it. We saw that it was an ICMP packet trying to go from here, which is our office mode pool, to this particular Nugget Firewall B, and then it actually allowed that particular information to come backwards, and it just completely redone the process of encrypting and decrypting the packets. Now we're going to dive into that quite a bit in this entire series when we get into more of the VPN type discussions. But you see what we get there? That is just a beautiful option for remote connectivity. It's going to make you completely scalable. It's going to give you a security solution that's going to allow you to be anywhere untangled without your laptop bag. So in my opinion, definitely a good option. You should be deploying it, and SSL Network Extender is going to work well for you. Alright everyone, we've arrived at the end of this particular nugget for the SSL Network Extender. In this particular nugget, we covered the concepts of why choose SSL Network Extender as an SSL VPN option for your organization, and we saw directly how flexible this type of application can be for you if you have any machine that has a web browser and also supports Java. That's going to give you the ability to connect remotely to your organization. And we cover the SNX concepts of this particular application, and then we cover the SNX configuration of how to get this set up in your own particular lab to assist you in your CCSC studies. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.